All right, and we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, and in this live stream, I have Pierre Rochard with me. He's been building a really easy implementation of how to get onboarded onto the Lightning Network with minimal friction, which is kind of what we really need for Lightning. So I guess, Pierre, we can just start. I have a question. I want to get to know you a little bit for like 5 or 10 minutes. If you could just give us a quick intro of like how you got into crypto. How did you discover
Yeah,
it?
for sure. Thanks for having me on, Ezra. So I got into crypto at the end of 2012 when I was a part of this group of crazy libertarians and anarcho-capitalists who are into Austrian economics and sound money and gold and silver, and we were debating fractional reserve banking versus 100% reserve banking, which is just like totally normal, par for the course conversation in that crowd. But outside of that crowd, we would be seen as absolute nut jobs. Anyway, Bitcoin naturally kind of came up in the course of the conversation, and I went down the rabbit hole and have really not come out since.
Yeah.
And have only gotten deeper and deeper into this crazy world. So, yeah, that was when I was in my last year of grad school. I was getting my master's in accounting at the University of Texas at Austin. And so I, let's see, the reason that I found Bitcoin to be really compelling was that in high school I had experimented a lot with Linux. You don't want your kids experimenting with drugs in high school. You want them experimenting with installing Debian on an old PowerPC computer. And although my parents were not excited about that, they thought I was wasting my time. But anyway, the upshot from that was that I kind of learned about open source and free software, and I listened to Richard Stallman's talks about the importance of open source and free software. And so when I saw that, hey, Bitcoin's like this open source money, and on top of that, the monetary policy, like when I looked at that graph that basically showed that we would cap out at 21 million Bitcoins, with my background of studying monetary economics and gold and silver and whatnot, I realized that if this holds, if this cap holds, this is going to be the best money ever conceived, and its value is going to dramatically appreciate as adoption increases, for any number of reasons. So yeah, that was my last year of grad school, and I graduated and went to work at kind of a normie NPC job at Deloitte, where I was auditing new issuances of securitization deals. And this was after the financial crisis, so it was much smaller than it was before the financial crisis. But basically, these were like mortgage-backed securities and all of this stuff that we've read about in the newspapers. And that was an interesting job, but ultimately, I got a phone call from a recruiter in Atlanta that was looking for like a Bitcoin savvy accountant, and so they for a startup called BitPay. BitPay is still around, but they're a shadow of what they could have been. Basically, merchant payment processing. So consumers send Bitcoins to BitPay as they're checking out at Newegg, for example, buying a new graphics card. And then BitPay deposits fiat into the merchant's bank account. And so it's a good, solid business. It was just terribly managed. And then they basically drove themselves into the ground with terrible business decisions. But they got bailed out eventually by Bitmain and became Bcashers. Anyway, so I moved back up to New York City, worked in the back office of a high frequency trading shop, helping them with their post-trade reconciliation stuff. And then I worked at a startup that was doing middle market M&A was basically like Tinder for medium-sized companies and investors. You swipe right or left based on their financial statements. So that was really interesting. I enjoyed that a lot. And yeah, I went out on my own in February of 2018 when my son was born, and I kind of went on indefinite paternity leave. And so I've been busy splitting my time between my two children, Bitcoin, and my son.
Yeah. It's what one question I had was what did like your NPC job, what did they think about Bitcoin? Like, I'm sure you mentioned it because any Bitcoiner, like, it's just
can't stop themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got investigated, is what they thought about it. Yeah, no, seriously.
Way, right?
Like, so what happened was that there was this like internal social media website called Yammer, and it was basically like Facebook but for like corporate NPCs. And you would go on and you like create a group. So I created like the Bitcoin group, and this was 2013, 2014. Already the whole shtick was like blockchain, not Bitcoin, was what everyone was talking about. And so I created like the Bitcoin group, and I was like, this is like Bitcoin, not blockchain group. So if you've got blockchain talk, like go create a blockchain group, but this is just for Bitcoin.
Drawing the hard line in the sand for this.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is about the money and the payment system. It's not about your nonsense. Anyway, well, that got proven right. Like over the next 5 years, I think that I was thoroughly vindicated on that. But anyway, I went to a conference in Atlanta, and one of the people who worked at Deloitte, she was like, she was doing like research at their, they got like this thing like GovLab for statists. It's like in Washington, D.C. It's like a think tank for, coming up with stuff for the government, whatever. But they were researching like Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto and all this. And they were going around speaking at conferences on behalf of Deloitte. And so they heard that like I went to a conference, and I didn't even really speak there. I was just like on stage at one point. And they were like, what's going on? Like, are you trying to like represent the firm at conferences and blah, blah, blah. And so they had like some like internal investigation of my involvement with Bitcoin and whether I had like conflicts of interest or anything like nonsense like that. But anyway, they were kind of nutty people, but I mean, it's a good firm and all, but I don't think that they were like equipped to deal with. Sorry, that's not fair. I was the nutty one. They were not equipped to deal with a crazy person like me. I think of them as crazy, but like it's mutual, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
it's always how it is when people are like up to like their neck in just Bitcoin and like.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Last night I was hanging out with my friends, and I was about to leave, and I was telling them about this. I was like, "Yeah, guys, sorry, I can't hang out too late. I got to get ready for this interview." And I talk about Bitcoin on Snapchat all the time. Like I'm always saying stuff about it. And then my friend was like asking me questions about it, like he was interested, and I was like, "All right, like here we go. I'm about to lay down some knowledge." And I don't know. He's just like, after about 10 minutes of talking, he's like, "Man, there's just so much to it," and like I could have explained it better, but it really is like, it's just so hard to explain what's going on because you get into one section and you have to explain another section, and it all just doesn't make sense because it's so different from what's been going on. It's like they just don't understand and they think we're crazy, but
yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so great to be involved. Like people like us, I feel like that. Like when I wake up, I want to listen to Andreas Antonopoulos talk about Bitcoin. Like that's like one of the first things. But the next question was, I wanted to know what attracted you to the Lightning Network. Maybe how did you get involved with that? Where you first heard of it? Some stuff like
that. So I first heard of it when the paper initially came out in 2015 or 2014. All I remember is that I was working at BitPay at the time. And So it was very relevant to our business because we were doing merchant payment processing, and but I've always had this bias of being interested in technologies that are actually like in existence, right? And actually have been proven out. So it's funny because like people are like, "Oh, Pierre, you're like an early Bitcoin adopter." I'm like, "No, I wasn't." Like when I came along, Bitcoin was working fine. Like it's not like it's not like I had to like deal with weird like bugs or losing money or anything like that.
Right.
Like by the time I came along, like it was the system functioned as advertised. So I don't consider myself like some kind of experimentalist there. And frankly, like I would not have been interested in Bitcoin at an earlier point. Like if I had heard about Bitcoin in like 2009 or 2010 or 2011, even like I don't know that I would have been as excited about it because it just hadn't been around long enough for me to say that it's got a track record of success and thus is worth me investing my money and time into. So same thing for Lightning, and frankly, same thing for any white paper that comes out today, right? Like, okay, that's nice that you wrote this white paper. I, Pierre, am not interested in it until this is on mainnet and is functioning. And so same thing with Lightning for me. Like I wasn't interested in it until he came out on mainnet earlier this year, and then I was like, okay, like this is real. This is something that's exciting. Now, that's a criticism of me, really, because there are plenty of people who had the foresight in 2014 who saw that this was going to be a big deal in years to come and who did invest time and money into building out the Lightning Network so that eventually Pierre could come along and say, hey, this actually is a legit project, right? So massive kudos to those who were much more intelligent than I and a much more low time preference and thinking far into the future. Whether it's like Lalu or Roast Beef, Elizabeth Stark, or I just interviewed Connor. So and then the Sea Lightning team like Rusty. So like there's and that's just like the people who've built implementations, like the people who actually wrote the white paper for Lightning Network. They're the real like visionaries in this. And then like Christian Decker was writing a paper about off-chain payments when the Lightning paper came out, and he was like, "Oh, you know what? I'll just set aside what I was working on and I'll work on this." And so there's a lot of people who were very ahead of their time, and they are being vindicated today on their decision on this. So why am I interested in Lightning? I'm interested in Lightning because there's kind of two parallel tracks on that. One is Bitcoin's on-chain payments do not scale, and so the reason that does not scale, broadly speaking, is because of hardware constraints and of internet speed and bandwidth capacity. So basically, the Bitcoin network on-chain payments, they're globally broadcasted. So everyone in the world has to agree on your on-chain payment. And that means that every single node on the Bitcoin network will have to receive your data at least once, but possibly more than that, more times than that. So that's a huge constraint because basically we have to think about the lowest common denominator, right? Who is it that we want to have access to the Bitcoin network that has the worst hardware and the worst internet connection? Because that's kind of where we draw the line of like, okay, anyone below this threshold does not have open access to the Bitcoin network and now has to rely on a trusted third party to enable their access to the Bitcoin network. So and we want to maintain the property of trust minimization, right? So if we have a trusted third party, now we're compromising on trust minimization because that trusted third party can be shut down by the government, or they can be violating your privacy or all sorts of other bad things. So it kind of defeats the point of Bitcoin to have to use a trusted third party. Now, that doesn't mean that we should never use trusted third parties. Like, it's a trade-off, right? And so some people, but what we want to have is we want to have the optionality of not having to use a trusted third party, so that if you get kicked off of Coinbase, that doesn't mean you no longer have access to Bitcoin. That just means that you've got to host your own wallet, or you've got to, run your own node, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, that's really like user, the friction of a user. Like Coinbase is, like, I was trying to get my friend to buy Bitcoin, and he wanted to go on Coinbase, and he's like, oh, he looked at it and saw that he had to enter his social security number, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, Bitcoin's sketchy. And I was like, no, it's not Bitcoin that's sketchy. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's
Coinbase
so much friction.
Yeah, for sure. And really, it's like, so we have to put more thought, I think, and effort into like local Bitcoins. Like, I like that, where if you can buy and sell Bitcoins peer-to-peer amongst each other, you don't have to like enter KYC AML nonsense. But anyway, that's kind of, and it's not even so much like because you're doing something illegal and you don't want the government to know. It's that you have to violate your own privacy, like putting in your, why does Coinbase need your social security number? And really, it's a failure of the government, right? Like the government failed to provide identification documents that aren't like completely doxing yourself and opening yourself up to pervasive identity, quote unquote, theft, where people, take out loans in your own name and all this. So like, it's not about doing anything illegal. It's about avoiding other hackers and like nefarious people scamming you. And so like the government created a system that was extremely vulnerable to these abuses, and then they have the gall to blame us and to say, oh, you guys are like doing sketchy things with the drugs and the money laundering. It's like, screw you guys, you created a shit system, all right, and now you expect us to like take the blame for that? Absurd. So it's really unacceptable what some of these statists have the nerve of saying. Anyway, sorry.
Getting real heated over here.
No, I get worked up about it because these people are retarded. Anyway, so and back to the scaling issue. So we want people to have the optionality to use Bitcoin in a trust minimized way, and to be able to opt out of this system of control that's been created by financial and political elites. And so the constraint is, it's primarily bandwidth, really. And I've noticed this from helping people set up their full nodes. The reason it takes weeks for someone to set up a full node, it's because they have a very slow internet connection. That's going to change over time. So over time, we're going to have bigger and better internet connections, mostly thanks to Netflix, right? Like people want to be streaming 4K video. And so that's what's actually Netflix and like, Pornhub or whatever. So I think that Netflix and chill and pornography are going to help Bitcoin be more decentralized because it creates demand for faster internet speeds, which allows people to download the blockchain and then keep up with the blockchain much more easily.
I think like the need for like more bandwidth was like quote unquote like sketchy things like, I don't know, Pornhub, like, that's pretty like who knew that would be like such a big driver of like technological advancement, like and like Netflix, people are like quote unquote like wasting their time watching movies. It's like, weird things like that kind of drive advancement in the technological space. Sort of like how I kind of thought Bitcoin mining, people think it's like a waste of electricity, but I think with more and more miners that join the network, there's like a bigger demand for electricity. So the ways of delivering that electricity will get more efficient, and then just trickle out into other areas of electricity use. So I kind of am all for more miners getting on the network and like the electricity grid getting like more locked up. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to do all that much damage to
the I completely agree with your assessment there. I think that as a civilization, we have under invested in the production of electricity. and we've kind of gone for like low-hanging fruit, starting with like coal-fired power plants, but really like what we need to move towards if we want to like really get to the next level of civilization is massive, investment in nuclear, in thorium, and there's like really innovative reactor designs that are much safer than, like, orders of magnitude safer than what we had to deal with, like with Chernobyl. And let's not forget, like, Chernobyl was created by communists, so we should expect it to like melt down. But I think that we could create a society where, because Bitcoin has caused so much investment in the production of electricity, that now the marginal cost of an extra kilowatt hour can get driven down to a very, very small amount, like much smaller than what we are paying today. And Bill Gates, I think, is the one who pointed this out, which is that the cost of electricity is like the number one driver of economic progress, because electricity goes into every single manufacturing process. And that's only going to be increasingly the case as we move forward with roboticization, with increased, the need for example, like machine learning. We're going to have to like power these massive data centers of machine learning algorithms that are making sense of the world. So I think that electricity is like if we think about like primitives or whatever, like electricity is like the most important part of our civilization. And to have Bitcoin redirecting investment away from stupid things like, oh man, there's so many stupid things that we're but like, for example, like I'm not offended that someone is spending more money, or that as a society, as a civilization, that we're having to spend more money on electricity for Bitcoin and less money on professional sports. Like, that's not a trade-off that I care about at all. And so anyway, yeah, I agree. Electricity is crucial, and Bitcoin's going to help us bring us to the next level as a civilization there. So scaling. So the reason that Bitcoin needs the Lightning Network, I think, is that essentially the way that we transition from paying for mining from the block subsidy to the creation of new Bitcoins, which is quote unquote inflationary. Now we can get into like the different definitions of that particular word, but we're increasing the supply of Bitcoins in order to subsidize the creation of new blocks, and to subsidize the what's called like the proof of publication. That is the colloquially the time stamping of transactions, so that we have an ordering of transactions through time, and we understand like which transactions came first and which ones came after, so we can avoid double spending. So that functionality of the system is being subsidized by the creation of new Bitcoins right now, and we need to transition to using transaction fees so that we don't have to create new Bitcoins, and we can maintain that beautiful 21 million cap, so that we maintain the soundness, and really the maximum soundness of this system. Like, the system would still have a sound money if it increased in supply by like 1% a year or something small like that. But if we want to maximize the soundness and keep that 21 million cap, then we got to transition to transaction fees. And so there's kind of two ways to think about transitioning to transaction fees. On one extreme, we have the Bcasher fantasy of, we will have so many transactions, and each one with a tiny little fee that we'll be able to easily transition to away from the block reward and to having transaction fees. So the reason I think that doesn't work is because what we were just discussing about scalability is that the size of blocks required to make that model of very small transaction fees times a multitude of transactions, like they talk about like gigabyte blocks, but that doesn't work for the foreseeable future, and by foreseeable future, I mean like the next few decades, because
Yeah,
bandwidth is just not growing that quickly. And also, like we should stay ahead, or we should stay far behind the growth of bandwidth. So like right now, I got fiber optic, installed at my house. Like I'm at the bleeding edge of it.
I
I don't
love
think
fiber, dude. Fiber is the best thing like of all time.
it is, but I don't think that the Bitcoin network should exclude everyone who does not have fiber.
Yeah.
Like that's just profoundly unjust and would lead to a system that's highly centralized. So I think that we should be targeting a much, lower bandwidth speed, and we should always be targeting like essentially what is like the bottom 10% of bandwidth speed. Like that should be the bottom 10th percentile should be kind of the cutoff in my mind. But and then the hardware, which I don't think is as big of an issue, but people do talk about running it on a Raspberry Pi and whatnot. Anyway, so that's why I don't think that making up for low transaction fees with volume works, because I think that it dramatically centralizes the system. And in a worst case scenario, the only people running full nodes are miners, and then the miners have full control over the system. And miners are highly centralized, right? We're seeing that in practice. So Bitcoin's decentralization should not be dependent on miners. I think this is a big misunderstanding in crypto, is that people think that Bitcoin is centralized because of the miners. No, Bitcoin is decentralized because of the peer-to-peer network of full nodes. The proof of publication functionality of the Bitcoin system is, unfortunately, far too centralized today. However, that situation is improving, and the consequences of centralization in that regard are very small compared to the consequences of centralizing nodes. In a hypothetical world where that's the case. So anyway, so the alternative to having many transactions with small transaction fees is having fewer transactions with higher transaction fees. And that really only works if there is what's called an inelastic demand for transactions. So price inelasticity. And let me illustrate this, which is that if demand for on-chain transactions is highly elastic, what that means is that there are substitute goods out there that people who want to use the Bitcoin system can easily swap out into. And so, for example, you might have people who, the moment that transaction fees start increasing on the Bitcoin network, they substitute with doing transactions on the Litecoin network. And so that means that there's not really any opportunity for having fee pressure on the Bitcoin network, because people like swap out into Litecoin and then swap back into Bitcoin, and do their transactions on Litecoin. So that means that on-chain fees on Bitcoin can't really go up if in this world, like the switching costs are so low that there's just not a lot of it's very elastic. So that's a bad outcome because that means that we never really get enough fee pressure to have. And let's talk about what the consequences of not having enough fee revenue making up for block reward is. It's that we have to wait for more transaction confirmations. And right now, the rule of thumb is like 6 transaction confirmations. But if hash rate does not keep up with value secured, right, then that rule of thumb starts increasing dramatically. And so 6 confirmations is 1 hour. Now, if hash rate is no bueno, then maybe it's 60 confirmations in 10 hours or 600 confirmations in 100 hours. And so that quickly blows out. And then that undermines the user experience on Bitcoin, right? And then if you're sending like $500 million worth of Bitcoins and you got to wait for several months for enough confirmations, like that's not good. And then in the worst case, like you have people that are like rewriting, doing massive deep reorgs of the Bitcoin blockchain because it's so cheap to do a reorg. So we don't want to get into that situation. We want to avoid that. And now, to me, Lightning transactions that are opening and closing channels, and then in the future they're going to be doing other things. But opening and closing channels, those transactions are not fungible in the sense that you can't do that transaction on the Litecoin network because you got to do it because you're dealing with Satoshis. You're using Bitcoins, and so you're anchoring your opening transaction was on the Bitcoin network, and now your closing transaction has to be on the Bitcoin network. And the people that you are sending Satoshis to back and forth on the Lightning network, they want Bitcoins. They don't want Litecoins or any other asset. And so essentially, I think Lightning creates an elastic source of demand for transactions on the Bitcoin network. And so if Lightning is massively successful, then we will always have a base amount of demand for on-chain transactions on the Bitcoin network that will drive transaction fees up and make sure that we always have enough hash rate to keep this beautiful system rolling forward, and to avoid the issue of having to create perpetual inflation because we don't have enough transaction fees.
Yeah. There is like I was reading last night, there's a way that you can, it's not atomic swap. What is it? Like cross-chain transaction with someone that's running both a Bitcoin Lightning node and a Litecoin Lightning node.
Yep.
And then they kind of just transact between chains. I thought that was like really interesting. I'm not like a Litecoin user. I bought a little bit like way back, and I think I don't even know where, honestly. Like I don't know where that Litecoin is, but
it's a good test net.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad we covered the scalability issue.
I think that was the fastest I have ever covered from A to Z, like the scalability issue. So I'm glad my pitch on that is getting tighter and tighter. But yeah,
it's hard to like like I said earlier, it's just so hard to get like a focus explanation because there's just so much to it. But I wanted to ask if you did any programming before you found Bitcoin, and what programming languages were you into?
No, I did not actually. Bitcoin is what motivated me to get into programming. So in the summer of 2013, when I had finished my accounting grad school, and I moved to New York City, but my job didn't start until like September. And so that's when I started. I went on Codecademy, and I started on the Python tutorial there and just learned how to do a for loop,
Yeah.
And started with that. And then I got into web development. There's an excellent tutorial on how to use Flask. And Flask is like this Python web framework. So if you Google like Flask tutorial, there's one by a gentleman called Miguel Grinberg, and his tutorial like got me really like it was hard to get through because it's like very thorough. But at the end of it, I was like, all right, I can like create a website, and that felt like a really good, that was a really good feeling, and it got me addicted to programming, and I didn't stop afterwards. I just kept learning more and more in all sorts of directions based on what was interesting to me at the time. Now, the reason I got into Python is that I wanted to write Bitcoin accounting software. And I have written and rewritten my Bitcoin accounting software several times now, redoing things as I learn new ways of doing things. But I still I haven't released it or like gotten out with it, but I see it as like I don't know. It's a very personal project to me, but eventually, like I'll turn it into something. But right now, it's just kind of on the back burner as I focus on what I see as like the huge like priority right now, which is onboarding people onto the Lightning Network.
As it should, for sure. I mean, there's like your Medium post was the first thing that I saw that was like, oh, I can get onto Lightning Network now. Like this post is like, it was super clear, and I ran into errors. I mean, you were helping me bug fix it. I spent 7 hours doing it, and I'm like, I went to school for computer programming. I was no expert like at all, but I mean, I have a decent grasp on how to use a computer, and it still took me forever. And then with your node launcher, it's, I mean, a few clicks and you're done. I still think it's super valuable to know what the node launcher is doing in the background so that you can kind of get a sense of, how to actually use a network. Because I think if you're just like pressing buttons to use it, like that's great for user experience. But as like, if you want to get like really into it, you kind of have to either use the CLI, the command line interface, or maybe use your power user in Excel to really see what's going on behind the scenes. So I think your node launcher is great for onboarding people. And I don't know if there's a way for you to implement like education into what's going on behind the scenes, like if the user wants. That kind of be, I don't know if that'd be hard to do or.
No, not at all. So that's music to my ears. But I definitely want to write more and more documentation that basically just like lays everything out. So in plain English, like if you want to learn about this stuff and you're non-technical, you don't have to get into like my Python code base or anything. I want to have like thorough documentation of exactly what the node launcher is doing. And then also what Lightning, LND, and the Bitcoin node are doing. Because I really want people to, if they're interested in it, and there are a lot of people who are fascinated by this technology, to fully understand the system. Because there's no reason why you don't have to be a cryptographer or a developer to fully understand the Bitcoin system. I say fully. I say fully in the sense of like how you're going to interact with it,
sure.
And really, as far as I understand the system, because like I don't fully understand the system myself, right?
Yeah.
Like this is an onion that I keep peeling every day, and I learn how little I know. The universe of how little I know grows every day. So by no means do I know everything or fully understand it. But what I meant is that I'll already, like based on my understanding of the Bitcoin Lightning stack, like there's a lot more that I could write explaining things. And so really what I wanted to start with was like getting the software in people's hands and getting them running it. Because I think that's kind of where it's and getting them to send an actual payment, because that's you send that payment and then you're like, okay, all right, now I need to like really get into what's going on.
Yeah, it takes the user having to like actually use it, like to kind of piggyback off of that, like to get my normie friends into crypto. I like send them $5 on, they download Mycelium and I send them $5, and then every now and then, a couple of people have come up to me like, dude, it's dropping. Like, what's up? And I was like, yeah, that'll happen. Like, I don't know. I just send them the first payment and show them how it works. And then that kind of, if they're the right person, because it really takes the right person to get into crypto right now. Like, you can't really force it on someone. Like, they have to be interested in it. Same with like developing for crypto. Like you said, you're programming, like you just got obsessed with it and you couldn't stop. It's like, that's what it takes to stay interested in this. Like, it's just like a personality type. Like, you have to be obsessed with it, I feel like, in order to stick with it right now in this moment at these prices and all that stuff. So
yeah, for sure. And there's also like, I remember during the previous bear market, there was a lot more discussion about Stoicism than I've seen in this bear market. And it's interesting to me that it didn't make a comeback, because it was clear to me in the previous bear market that all of us were getting interested in Stoicism for a reason, which is that the price had reached $1,200 and then it crashed like $200. So there's a lot of like psychological damage that comes with that, and so I would beg everyone to go get Google Stoicism and just start reading. Maybe learning about Stoicism should be like a higher priority than learning about lightning.
Oh my God.
But once you're done reprogramming your brain to be a little more detached to, and more okay with what's going on in the outside world that's outside of our control, then you can get into lightning. And really the most important thing is finding what is within your control. Like, what's within my control is being able to create this node launcher from scratch. Like I knew that I could do it. And so it's like, it's very easy to like tune out the price crashing or whatever when like I'm iterating as quickly as I can on something that's within my control. So I would implore everyone to go study Stoicism. There's a Stoicism subreddit as well. But yeah, Marcus Aurelius. And then if you want to get deep into Stoicism, there's a scholar, a French scholar actually, who wrote an analysis of Marcus Aurelius that was very influential on me. It's called The Inner Citadel. And retreat to your inner citadel and close your eyes to. And it's funny because like I still check the price all the time, right? Yeah. But it just doesn't have like an effect on me, and I still have thoughts of like, oh man, I should have sold it 20 grand. Like it'd be doing a lot better today. I could buy back in much lower, right? But that, like, I laugh at that. Like I can't. Yeah. But it's thoughts I still have. But if you are deep into Stoicism, like those thoughts don't like stick to you, and they don't affect your emotions to the point of like, laying on the ground depressed or anything like that.
Like I'm still not entirely sure what Stoicism means, but I can relate to everything you said, because my first interaction with crypto was mining electronium on my laptop. Have you heard about electronium?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, good. All right. It's not very good. But it was my first introduction. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can earn it on my laptop. And my laptop has a 970M, and I earned $100 in the first day by mining it. It was insane. And so I was telling all my friends, I bought a mining rig specifically for electronium. Yeah. Held it all the way through. It 20x'd at one point. It's so funny. At one point, I had $6,000 in electronium. I was telling everyone, I was like, this is amazing. It's going to be like the future, not just electronium, but crypto too. Yeah. And beginners don't know what they're doing, and I still don't know what I'm doing, but I held all the way down, and that $600 is now $200. And it's funny because I can actually laugh at that and just be like, nice. Like, all right, I know what not to do next time. And it really doesn't affect my thinking in a negative way at all. Like, yeah, it's a mindset you have to have in order to be in this world.
It is. And recently, a couple of days ago, do you know Peter McCormack?
Yes.
Yeah. So he had a thread that starts with, so here's a thread on how I turned $32,000 into $1.2 million and back to pretty much zero once taxes are paid. Yeah. And it's a fantastic thread because it is a shared experience of really like almost everyone in this space. And there's, I find that there's two stories. Like one is like the rags to riches to rags story. And then there's also I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. I wanted to buy some, but I never followed through on it. And then like, here we are. For sure. Like, it's not even people who like became rich and then became poor. It's people who could have been rich. And so like, you have to deal with the psychology of that. Otherwise, it'll eat away at you and render you like bitter and useless to society. And so it's if you have the right mindset about it, like it's life, right? And it's part of the journey. And the other thing that I was having a conversation with a friend who's really into video games, and like if I had played all of my cards correctly, and like, you know, I was like Roger Ver, you know, multi-hundred millionaire or whatever, like it's kind of like cheat codes, right? It kind of ruins the game for you. And the rags to riches to rags story to me is kind of like if you play Diablo 2 all the way through and then like you start over with nothing. Like I like starting a video game over from the beginning. Like there's something that's fun about that, where you know all about like the game, you know how you know all the missions and like everything you got to do, and so it's actually kind of like more fun the second time around when you've already played it once. And so like that's how I would kind of think about these markets of like, all right, you've played the bull market once now, you get to play it again.
Yeah.
And
that's a great analogy. I've never heard it before, and that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
assuming there is another bull market.
Right. Yeah. We got to add that disclaimer in there. Yeah. I was watching an interview with you, and I really liked the idea of having like a multi-decade outlook on both Lightning and Bitcoin, because we're just talking about you need to have the right mindset to get into crypto. And how many people have the right mindset? Like not a lot of people. Like not everybody can get into it right now. And that probably speaks to two things. One, the user experience, and two, just the volatility. And we can't control one of those two. You're working on the user experience, but we can't work on the price. It's really just a matter of time and adoption. So yeah, I think that speaks to like having a 40-year outlook on this before it gets more stable. And I mean, there's nothing we can do except for wait and just try and increase the user experience, like make it better.
Yeah, and really like how I wish you know, every price graph looked is like if you connected the trough of every bear market, like the bottom of every bear market, and you just connected those lines, it's like a steady like increase over time. And to me, that's like Bitcoin's like quote unquote like fundamental value. Although realistically, like the fundamental value is like a little bit greater than that, because I think that we overshoot in the bear market. Like we go below the fundamental value, like based on adoption and whatever else, and technology and like time and all that. But I think that the fundamental value of Bitcoin is just going to continue to slowly accumulate over the coming decades, and but not on its own, right? Due to the efforts of the people working on it, and like I'm doing my small part, but there's lots of other people that are involved, both from like Bitcoin protocol, Lightning protocol, and then to the other extreme of like creating memes on Twitter, right? Like I think that Bitcoin is like you know, like in the military, like they talk about like combined arms. Like you've got like the Navy, the Air Force, the Army. Like we got to fight this war in every single and in space too, right? We're going
space,
to the
yes.
So it really, to me, it is a combined arms total warfare, where we have to be covering the full spectrum. And we have to have like people that are strong in every regard, and even like you like created like a YouTube video of how to do things. So like if we are multimedia and we have like Medium posts, tweets, YouTube videos, podcasts, eventually like we need to have our own version of CNBC, like because right now like we're on cable news. But it's always like they always have like charlatans on, you know, they have like Vinnie Lingham or other just complete retards like that. But if we had our own like cable channel, then people could actually hear from like Trace Mayer and like a good. You could even have, like I want to have like Peter Wollo on like national television. But so that's something that needs to be worked on, and across the spectrum of media, and then also like across the spectrum of devices. It needs to be simple and easy to use Lightning on your mobile phone, on your desktop, on your laptop, on your hardware node, on your Casa node, on your Raspberry Pi. Like whatever people can get their hands on, they should be able to onboard onto the Bitcoin network, onto the Lightning network, and then that's kind of like from a hardware device point of view. From a financial perspective, like you should be able to buy Bitcoins using cash at an ATM, using cash on local Bitcoins, using your prime brokerage account at Goldman Sachs when you're buying futures or buying an ETF, and everything in between, with like Coinbase or Gemini or Bitstamp or Bitfinex or BitMEX. Like I see like in all these different areas, there's a massive spectrum of use cases that all need to be catered to with the highest quality of service. And there are massive deficiencies in some areas. And then in other areas, like we're doing great. So also storage, hardware wallets, Glacier protocol, to like hot wallets and everything in between. So like, yeah, that's how over the coming decades, as we like build every single one of these building blocks up, and we have people that are specialized on each one of them. Like we don't need like we need specialists. We don't need like jack of all trades, master of none type people. Well, I mean, we need those people too, right?
We need everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, we need everyone.
That's how Fortnite got so popular. It's free to use and you can use it on any platform.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we need Bitcoin. We need Bitcoin to become like Fortnite, but it's going to take like 40 years.
Yeah.
Slow moving Fortnite.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that like there's massive improvements being done to the Bitcoin protocol itself, and those are going to take years to because like the reason Bitcoin protocol development is so slow is that we're trying to get it right. It's like measure 1,000 times, cut once, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to do a soft fork or a hard fork as few times as possible. And so yeah,
I think that's a good point, because I was watching I've been slowly watching all the talks from Andreas Antonopoulos, Internet of Money, the second volume.
Yeah.
And in one of those he mentions, I'm pretty sure it was him, he mentioned blockchain. It was like blockchain as a as a court, where the standard Bitcoin blockchain, or this wasn't Andreas, I just realized this is someone else, but the blockchain is like the enforcer of all the rules, and then like second layer protocols will do their own thing on the side and then go to Bitcoin as like, hey, these are the rules, like can you please enforce these rules that we're running on the side? And it'll either, if they're playing by the Bitcoin rules, it'll agree or disagree. And I think that's really good. Like you, as we mentioned before, like you need to have the base layer with the fees, and there will always be fees on the blockchain, on the standard Bitcoin blockchain, because there has to be some incentive to enforce those rules. And then on the side, there will be lower fees because it's not really relying on every transaction to be enforced on Bitcoin. It's just in Lightning, the closing and opening of the channel is the only thing that's enforced on the actual blockchain.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm trying to find, there is a Greg Maxwell Reddit post that explains exactly what you're talking about, with let's see, I'll find it, and then we can put it in the show notes, because it was actually it was a good explanation of that.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess the one, I would like to put out resources. In the description, I put out a bunch of resources that I found last night and through my studies. But I would like to ask you, where would you point a beginner to learn about Lightning, and like maybe the protocol behind it and maybe why it's important?
So the challenge with Lightning, with understanding Lightning at kind of a protocol level, is that you have to understand Bitcoin. That's just a complete prerequisite.
Yep.
Lightning payments are actual Bitcoin transactions. They're just not being broadcasted. So my recommendation would be to pick up Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos. Work your way through that. Now, there is a small-ish section on Lightning in at the end, but I think that area can be improved and elaborated on, and so I look forward to the third edition that does that.
Yeah.
Or even someone writes Mastering Lightning. I'm not volunteering for that.
You're up. You're up next for that.
But what I do, and then after reading Mastering Bitcoin, the next thing is to read the Lightning protocol specification. That's written in plain English. There needs to be something in between those two, though. And I think I will write a Medium post of how does Lightning work at kind of a high level. If you've read Mastering Bitcoin, and then you can read this, because and then maybe I'll go and do a pull request on Mastering Bitcoin instead of open source.
Insane, dude. That's in depth and so hard to understand. You have to focus on reading that thing.
Yeah.
So there definitely has to be some improvement on. I mean, it's super detailed, but just for regular users to understand, you can't toss a beginner into that. They're going to be I don't like Bitcoin because it's way too hard.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, for someone who is sending payments on Lightning, they shouldn't need to understand how it works.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we can, once this live stream's over, I'll get that link from you, and we can put it in the description there.
Sounds good.
So yeah, let's we have this Twitter question here.
Yep.
They are asking, I'll share my screen here. Or maybe, oh, okay, I got it. All right, so they're asking, how does the Lightning Network work for a business trying to accept more money than it has already spent? Similarly, it's hard to have a donation address for Lightning because you need a large empty channel. I see empty channels being highly coveted.
Let's keep that question up so I can kind of work through the multiple parts. So, a business that's trying to accept more money than it has already spent, basically, what they're asking is, how do you get inbound capacity? Because when you open a channel with another node on the Lightning network, you basically you have just unidirectional capacity, unless you communicate with the other node so that they also put up money, and then you have bidirectional routing capacity. And so currently, the Lightning specification is on 1.0. In the 1.1 specification, thanks to the efforts of Lisa Nagut, they're going to have a way of you signaling that that you're interested in opening bidirectional channels, and so you can advertise that you will put up capacity on your end. And so I think that this issue is going to become less and less of a problem. Currently, you have to go outside of the network and do a phone call to your friend and be like, "Hey, can you open a channel in my direction so that you can route payments to me?" But that's going to go away fairly quickly. So really, the thing to keep in mind with the Lightning Network is that this is the beginning. It just got on the Bitcoin mainnet, and they're on every single aspect of the Lightning Network today. We can say, all right, it works, but on every single one of them, we know in the future, or imminently in the foreseeable future, there are 10x improvements or 100x improvements coming. So I think that a lot of the the routing payment, the routing failures, and the difficulty of setting things up, all of this, there's just massive improvements coming down the pipe, and that's part of why I'm extremely excited about Lightning Network. Like in its current state, like it would be really bad if in its current state, like this is the best we could do.
Yeah, for sure.
I would be very pessimistic about the Lightning Network, but I know that from an engineering perspective, that this is just going to keep improving big league. So similarly, it's hard to have a donation address for Lightning. So this is actually because you need a large empty channel. There's a bigger problem with the donation address on Lightning, which is that you gotta like create you gotta create a payment request, and in the payment, you as the recipient of the donation have to create a payment request that specifies how much is being donated to you, which is kind of unusual for donation, right? Normally the donation amount is determined by the sender, and then the recipient is like, oh, okay, great, thanks. So there are workarounds for that. Now, as for the large empty channel, that's not the case. Like the donor could open a channel with you, and just send some payments through route payments through that channel that they opened with you specifically.
Right. Like you don't need to fund the channel personally, because the person opening the channel will already fund it, and it'll be like unidirectional, and then that's a donation.
Yeah, exactly. And then also like so he says I see empty channels being highly coveted. I think that we really need to work on using the right words. Empty channels is kind of like implies something different. He's saying channel capacity basically is highly coveted, and yeah, that's true. And that's why we'll have routing fees to compensate people for creating channel capacity and for helping routing payments.
Gotcha. I was checking out the Rexplorer, and it mentions that there's like a certain amount of Bitcoin that's in the network, and then the fees that are actually being transmitted are like, I don't even know what it says, like negligible or something like that. Like the fees, there aren't enough in fees to show on there. Is that true, or is that just like I don't know. Do you think owning a Lightning Network or a Lightning Network node would be a viable source of income, maybe like $2 to $5 a day, or is it not really? That doesn't really work like that.
I mean, it would be cool if it was like universal basic income. You just put up your routing. No, I don't think so. Basically, there are going to be people who make a business out of running routing nodes, but if you think about it from like an efficient markets perspective, like I don't think you're going to earn an extraordinary rate of return from running a routing node, and there are going to be operational difficulties in running a routing node, where basically I think that people are, companies are going to run routing nodes where they're putting a lot of effort and resources into maintaining high availability, low latency, and curating their channels so that they are capital efficient. Because if you have if you go on the Lightning Network and you just open a bunch of different channels with different people, you're just going to tie up your money, and you're not going to be routing payments. You got to be very intentional about who you're opening channels with if your intent is to route payments for other people. And like that's going to get more and more automated. And eventually like we'll have like AIs doing that. But there's going to be things that AIs just simply cannot anticipate. So for example, you might get like insider information about like, oh, this new service is rolling out a new feature that's going to make it much more popular. And so it's going to require much more routing capacity. All right, let's open channels with them in anticipation of that. And so essentially you're like front running the AI. So there's that. But from like people at home, running their own routing node and allowing them to, give them $5 a day of routing fees, like I don't see that as being an outcome unless the demand for payments on Lightning is just astronomical, right? Where the velocity of payments being sent is so great that really it's like the constraint is on the supply of channel capacity. Um, and that's a case where like basically you have so many people, you know, you got like a billion people using their Lightning nodes on, or their Lightning wallets on their mobile, on their iPhone, and on their computers, but they themselves are not routing anything, and so they're dependent on people who go through the trouble of setting up a routing node. And so there it's just like the demand so outstrips the supply that, hey, yeah, if you go through the trouble of setting up your routing node, and if you have like one Bitcoin that you can like dedicate, you know, like staking essentially on Lightning, that you'll get a good return. That's a possible outcome. I can't rule that out. It just seems as though like that seems far-fetched. Like I don't think that people actually need to send that many payments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out in 40 years, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And then sticking with the outcome of the future, what do you like? In my mind, when I was writing this question down, I had like a vision of like 3 months to 6 months. With your node launcher, what are you hoping to roll out that will help the onboarding process, and maybe a feature that, you know, will make it a little more enticing for people to use?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the first thing that I'm currently working on right now, when you hit launch on the Bitcoin node or on the Lightning node, it opens up two separate applications, right? One is the Bitcoin graphical user interface called Bitcoin Qt, and that's your Bitcoin node. And then on the other window, when you open up Lightning, it opens up a command line interface where the Lightning process is running. So what I want to do is bring those two inside the node launcher, so that essentially there aren't like separate things running. It's the two processes are embedded inside of the node launcher, and I provide a graphical user interface for understanding the current state of your set of nodes inside the node launcher, so that it's just a cleaner experience for people. Second thing that I want to develop in the near future is providing a better feedback on your data directory, because I think it's really important that you run your Bitcoin full node, first of all, and second of all, that it runs unpruned, because pruning actually prevents you from having what's called a transaction index, which makes LND a little slower. But also pruning is not really officially supported by LND. So there can be breaking changes that mean that your pruning setup is kind of screwed up and you got to like re-download the entire blockchain. So I do see it as a huge priority to get people running a full node that is not pruned. Oh, and the other part is that like full node, because Neutrino is not on mainnet yet. But even when Neutrino is on mainnet, I think that running a full node is important from a decentralization perspective. So the challenge there is you have to have enough hard drive space. And so I want to have a much more robust way of explaining to the user, here are the two hard drives on your system. You've got a solid state drive. It's got 200 gigabytes of capacity. You've got a spinning hard drive that's got 500 gigabytes of capacity. We can use your secondary slow hard drive for storing the blockchain. But if you free up some space on your SSD, then this is going to be a lot faster, especially if you have like a fiber internet connection where the bottleneck is going to be your hard drive read-write speed. And so communicating the performance and capacity issues relating to hard drives on your system, I see as a big priority coming up. And then also like I want, if you're a laptop user, consider like getting an external SSD drive that you hook up when you want to do like where basically you would be running both pruned and unpruned. So you would have a pruned data directory on your laptop hard drive, and then an unpruned data directory on your external hard drive that you hook up when LND requires you to be running unpruned because something got updated and they need that the ability to rescan the blockchain for your LND Lightning wallet. So anyway, these are like very technical issues, but I want to be able to communicate them to the end user, and that way the node launcher is really highly optimized and allows users who are sophisticated but not necessarily like command line or frankly lazy like myself. Like I use my node launcher not because I need to, but because it's the most convenient tool out there, right? And so like I'm definitely dogfooding on that, and that's kind of the same way I see like the product roadmap for the node launcher is very much about scratching my own itch. Okay, so that's kind of from the setup perspective, and then I start digging deeper, which is that once I have the processes embedded inside of the node launcher, I want to communicate to the user the current state of the node much more granularly than he's getting from either the command line interface for Lightning or from the Bitcoin QT interface. And so something that it's been proposed on Bitcoin Core before for the graphical user interface there, but I think that, it's kind of slow because they're having to implement this in C++, and I think I can implement it much more quickly in Python, is a memory pool visualizer. So you can kind of see what the current state of the memory pool is. Also, you can see the state of recent blocks so that you can determine what is a reasonable fee for me without having to rely on the fee estimator, which can be a little... I don't want to criticize the fee estimator. I have a lot of respect for the work that Alex Morkos put into it, and I think that it's generally a good fee estimator. But I think that people who really want to get their hands dirty and want to really minimize the fee that they're paying, they might want to have more insight into what the current state of the mempool is without having to go to Joho's mempool, which is like a trusted third party, right? So you have that data available to you if you're running a Bitcoin node because it has the memory pool right there. It's just the ability to visualize it and query it. So there's that. Also, better error handling on your Lightning node. Like right now, I myself have encountered this where I had to like stop and restart the Lightning node several times to like get it to sync correctly. I could go into the Go code of LND and fix that, but I'm not a Go expert. So I'm just going to handle that in the Python and just have it manually restart LND. And then let the LND team fix that at their own pace and do it correctly on their end. But there's that. And also provide feedback on how long the initial block download is going to take. Right now, you don't really know how long you have left, but I could estimate that in Python and then provide a very nice progress bar that says, all right, you've got anywhere. It's like if you're on fiber with the really good hardware, initial block download can take 30 minutes.
That's
if you have if you have slow internet or slow hardware, it can take 2 weeks.
And that's even crazier.
Yeah. So I want to be able to communicate that to the user, and I want to be able to communicate to them to the reason that this is taking so long is because of your internet connection or because of your hard drive or your CPU or your RAM. I want them to know what the bottleneck is because users, node operators addressing their bottlenecks is what is going to allow Bitcoin to continue to scale in the future. And so they need to be cognizant of what is bottlenecking their initial block download. And I mean, they're keeping up with the tip should never be bottlenecked because otherwise we're in a disastrous scenario of we've turned into Ethereum if keeping up with the chain tip is hard. Anyway, that's my dig at Ethereum. You got to have like one per podcast, right?
Yeah, it's hidden in there somewhere. Okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm excited to hear that. Yeah, go ahead.
So that's kind of like from the node launcher perspective. I want to write my own Lightning wallet. So the node launcher is essentially going to have a Lightning wallet inside of it. It's going to be like the most low level advanced Lightning wallet is what I would want to do. And it wouldn't be pretty like Zap or pretty like Jewel. It would be just like full of buttons and gizmos and widgets that give you the full access to all of the capabilities of opening and closing channels and all of the like nitty gritty details, and then have like cool like visualizations. Because with Qt, and I can't really do this with the XL plugin, but with Qt, you can do hardware graphic acceleration using OpenGL. And so I could do like 3D visualizations of the Lightning Network on your desktop. Like that would, there's just like a lot to be done there. I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome. And then a follow-up for that is, what's one thing that you learned while coding this? Because how long have you been working on it?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me look. Limiting it to one thing is going to be hard.
Yeah, for sure. I actually wrote down 1 or 2.
So the first release was 21 days ago. So it's been a month.
That's a lot of progress for a month, honestly.
It kind of blows my mind.
I asked you how the development was going like 2 weeks in, and you're just like, great, like everything's all good. And I was like, damn, okay. Like I just wouldn't imagine something like this being easy.
Well, I mean, here, let me
not that it's easy. It's just
no. I know what you mean. Let's see. I want to see when I wrote my Medium post. So I wrote the Windows plus Lightning Network Medium post on November 17th, and that's what compelled me to write the graphical user interface. So that was like about exactly a month ago. But so the issue, so like I knew Python, so that wasn't a problem. I kind of knew the stack of Bitcoin and Lightning. I didn't know Qt very well. So it's kind of the UI interface toolkit that I've been using. So that's kind of been the biggest thing I've learned. But really, like, the biggest surprise I've had is that people will just download my software and run it. I didn't really expect that. But I mean, I do that all the time, right? Like it's funny to be in the creator seat of like, really, you're gonna run my software? Like,
yeah.
But because people like implicitly trust me. They're like, well, Pierre's got like 40,000 followers on Twitter. He's not gonna like write like malware that scams me. So I guess I'll just download this and run it. Which is kind of scary that people will just, rely on my reputation like that because, Bitcoin's all about trust, or don't trust, verify. But so that's been the biggest surprise.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that like a number on a website or like a title on a website will make people trust you way more without really diving too deep into like who you are or what
or like looking at the Python code, right? And like evaluating its suitability and that it doesn't have anything bad in it.
Yeah, I had, as I mentioned earlier, my first coin was Electronium. And it was the first coin that got me into mining. And I was in their Telegram group in like November and October of 2018 or 2017 when the bull run was happening. I was in there so much that they gave me an administration spot where I could like, kick people. And I would just really point people to resources that I found because I was still learning. Like I didn't know anything, and they let me be an admin. Like it was crazy. And then people would like, I made a video on YouTube that's super outdated now, so I removed it on my channel, but it did really well. It was teaching people how to mine, and just like what to expect. And I remember one time I was in the Telegram group, and I had like linked someone to the channel or to the video, and then we were in the DMs, and the first thing that they said to me was like, "Oh man, I can't believe I'm actually talking to you right now." And my video had like 4,000 views, and I was like, "I'm just a guy, dude. Like, there's really nothing special. I just have a want to learn more, and I don't know. It's just crazy to me. That's kind of where I realized like having power over people is kind of worthless because like the only person that knows what you really are or what you stand for is you, and other people's opinions shouldn't really matter all that much to you because they don't know what you're about. Like only you know what you're about and can validate that. So I just think that's just one thought that I had that has stuck with me since then. So anything else that you learned from doing that?
Well, there's a lot of people that don't want to have to deal with the command line, right? And having a graphical user interface has been a huge help for a lot of people. And I knew that it would be helpful. I didn't anticipate this level of response to it, and so it's exciting to see that. And yeah, I just want to keep like iterating on it, making it more and more useful for people. And really, it's like my goal is to get as many people on Lightning as possible before the next bull run happens, if it happens. Well, because basically the on-chain transaction fees are going to go up a lot, like they did last time.
That's a great point.
So last time it reached like $35 a transaction, I think. And so I want to have people to have the ability to send Bitcoins to each other. And, for like the Christmas in 2019, like be able to gift some Bitcoins to a friend using Lightning, even if on-chain fees are like $100 or $200 or whatever. So yeah, getting as many people on board as possible over the next 12 to 18 months is kind of the goal for me.
Awesome. And what kind of time frame do you see yourself working on the launcher? Is it like indefinitely until something else cool pops up, or?
Well,
it's a hard question to ask because you're looking.
This is going to sound grandiose, but I do see it as like the node launcher is like the center of my universe, like because really because running a node is so important, and it's kind of that's where all of the self-sovereignty comes from. That said, on the Bitcoin side, like I anticipate that once I have things implemented, it's just going to stay the same. Like the base layer is not changing, so I don't need to do any work on the Bitcoin side. On the Lightning side, like they're going to be changing things. I'm going to need to like tweak things under the hood, but it's not going to be. It's going to be like little maintenance items. It's not going to be like complete overhauls or complete rethinking. So I think that it's going to gradually like take less and less of my time. And then I'm gonna here's what's gonna be interesting is like, we're talking about routing nodes earlier, extending the node launcher so that it's not just about launching a node on your desktop or laptop, but launching a node in the cloud, and making it a routing node, and then integrating with like BTC Pay Server for like merchant payment processing, integrating it with the Casa like hardware nodes, so that your node launcher can communicate with those. So that kind of stuff. What I want to do is what you were doing. I want to create like YouTube videos of how to get all set up on this. I was thinking I need to get like a green screen, put it behind me, and something else cool that I had this idea yesterday of getting a logo made for it. And like the army insignias that have like like animals like holding thunderbolts or like in their claws or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if like I googled it and I found it was like the joint like air command or whatever that has like that logo, and I was like, I want that logo except like the honey badger holding lightning bolts, and then it's like showing its teeth and it's like a pissed off honey badger, and make that like the node launcher insignia like logo that I put on the application icon and on the website. Like I want to create a website for it and all this infrastructure for it. But yeah, make sure it has like its own identity.
Yeah, you should definitely, not that I need to tell you what to do, but like building a brand around that for the next, for new users that see it, when they see the logo, they can think of your program and think of the Lightning Network. And
yeah, and it gives it like legitimacy. Like,
yeah.
Oh, like this thing's branded. Okay, this is awesome.
Yeah, like, I can trust this guy. He's got a picture of a bear.
Also, if it's like a fierce honey badger and it's like kind of got like a military style to it, people are gonna like take it like, oh, this is aggressive. I like it.
Yeah. Okay, so we went through all like the questions that I had. I guess I have two more. What made you decide to use a Lightning Labs implementation over? Because there's three total, right? There's the Lightning Labs, and then the C, and then one other thing that I'm not too familiar with. But
sorry, one of my like VIP node launcher users had a little issue, so I wanted to make sure he
gotcha.
gets away. So I chose LND because it has a programming interface called gRPC that makes it very easy to create to interact with. Also, the Joule browser Chrome extension works with LND, and the Zap wallet uses LND. Okay. And so I really wanted that because basically the Joule browser extension is, I think, the most important project right now for onboarding Lightning users, because it allows you to easily send payments from within the browser, so you don't have to like have an external application. And so catering to that use case, I thought was extremely important, because we want application developers. Like C Lightning to me is about it's what you run on your server. Whereas like LND is what you run in the background for client applications. Now, I'm sure the C Lightning team would disagree with me, and the LND team would disagree with me in both directions. And like they want to be catering to both, obviously. But that's kind of the way I see it. And yeah.
Okay. And then my one question, the last question that I'd written down was, what application or use case would you like to see built on the Lightning Network? It doesn't necessarily have to like actually happen or be feasible right now, but and then to add on that, one of the videos I was watching, which is linked in the description, I think there's two videos that beginners should watch. It's the one with Elizabeth Stark. The first one is the Blockchain and Us. I think that's the first one that they should watch, because it kind of gives an overview of why Bitcoin's important, and then the actual, like, it kind of compares Lightning Network to the early days of information routing, aka the internet. And then the next one is The Importance of Layer 2 by Elizabeth Stark, which goes deeper into the Lightning, the comparison between Lightning and the internet. And after I watched that video and saw how basically Lightning was kind of like HTTP, the protocol of transferring information, and then things were built on top of the HTTP layer. And those are kind of like the trusted third parties and things that will actually be like built by users or used by users.
Yeah. So on the question of like what application I want to see, like the I guess this is the most obvious one, but a Bitcoin exchange where you can withdraw onto Lightning directly is kind of my number one thing right now. Because currently, if you want to get onto Lightning, you got to send Bitcoins from Coinbase to your Lightning wallet. So that's one transaction, and then open a channel, and that's a second transaction. Really, I think that Coinbase should, or any other place where you buy Bitcoins, should open a channel to your Lightning wallet and send your Bitcoins to that channel, without you having to do anything.
Yeah, and that kind of avoids the coins actually being held by a third party too. Like you make that transaction and then it's yours instantly, and yeah, that's definitely a really important thing that would help user experience and also just the security. Really, I mean, not your keys, not your coins, sort of thing.
Yeah. On the other hand, like it's still kind of insecure because it's a hot wallet. Right. But in terms of not having to trust an exchange, and then it's also like, they should have it where like you can withdraw with Lightning up to $500, above $500 worth of Bitcoin. Then we're going to do an on-chain transaction, and then you would put that in your cold storage or whatever. But just to be able to like easily buy Bitcoins to like replenish your Joule Chrome extension, without having to go do an on-chain transaction would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. I think I have all the information that I want so far. I guess before we end, I just wanted to make sure that people look in the video description for the 2 videos that I mentioned before, and then there's just a bunch of stuff down there that will help people kind of understand more about Lightning and where they can go if they want to develop on it and just kind of get to know the system more. And then Pierre, any final thoughts on your node launcher or Lightning or crypto?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's watching this and they've made it to hour and a half, that means that they're already pretty interested in it. So right. I would just encourage them to follow up, get your nodes launched, DM me or contact me. I think I'm pretty available for helping people out. So I would just encourage people to keep learning and keep experimenting.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Pierre, for taking the time. I mean, when I contacted you, I think I had like 20 followers or something, and I just reached out to you. I was like, I need help with this Lightning thing, and you were definitely available and willing to help. And just the fact that you're doing this live stream with me shows kind of what your character is like. Like, you're willing and actively helping out people that that are just small and like, I don't know, that won't necessarily benefit you from like helping me out. So that really speaks to your character. And I think anyone watching this, like, agree or disagree with mine or Pierre's values, like he's like doing work to onboard people onto Bitcoin and Lightning and helping the user experience out. And I think no matter what the person's personal beliefs are, like, you can't really argue with someone that's taking time out of their life to cause life be able to have a place of less friction of onboarding and also educating too. I mean, the Medium posts, like, I just saw that you published from nothing to having like the Lightning node running, the Zap wallet, and the Joule implementation. Like, that's going to take a lot of time and probably be frustrating to do, but I mean, you're putting in the work to have those resources available. So I would just like to thank you for taking time out of your life to do those sorts of things.
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate that. I when I got into Bitcoin, the first thing I really wrote about Bitcoin is called "End the Fed, Hoard Bitcoins," and that was, I think, in February of 2013. So we're coming on like 5 years of this, and I do I do see what I'm doing as being very selfish.
It is like, yeah, being
Because
kind to people is
the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to end the Federal Reserve and destroy the U.S. dollar. So it's all like it's all part of Adam Smith's invisible hand, and I do see this as like an ideological project of mine, and it's very exciting to see how many people are like going along with this, because to me it's like it's such a crazy experiment. But I think we've got a good shot at really changing the world. And like the reason I want to end the Fed is not because I want to see like chaos and anarchy. It's like, well, I do want to see anarchy. I am a crypto anarchist, but let's not equate chaos with anarchy. It's not because I want to see us have like a big financial crisis and see people suffer. Quite the opposite. Like I think that paper money, government issued money, and the central banks, fractional reserve banking, and then the entire like panopticon surveillance state that they've built on top of it is a real drag on human freedom and on our ability to create a prosperous society that values long-term growth over short-term growth. And so I do see it as like almost a moral responsibility of mine to make sure that Bitcoin is as successful as quickly as possible, so that we can get out of this system that really benefits the few elites and get into a system that benefits a much wider set of people who are producing producing valuable goods and services in society, and who are just helping their fellow man instead of trying to like extract wealth from them using political machinations or financial engineering.
Yeah, we're in it for the tech.
Yeah.
we're in early for the tech.
Yeah, and honestly, like this would be a far-fetched utopian dream if it didn't mean that like there was a huge profit motive. If there was not like, yeah, you can make a lot of money just by like owning Bitcoins. If that was not the case, then this would just be a fringe movement like any other past political movement. Like the Libertarian Party is tiny in the United States. And crypto is much bigger than libertarianism ever was in the United States. And that's because there is that profit motive. And so I don't want to bash the people who are in it for the money, because I'm partly in it for the money as well, right? Like I think that's important. It wouldn't work without that.
Yeah. All right. I think we covered a wide variety of topics, and I think if someone watched all the way through, they will have learned at least one thing, and I think that is a good thing to strive for. So Pierre, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, and I'm hoping we help people out. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday or whatever day you're watching this, and just keep researching and keep with the crypto thing if you're obsessed with it, because it'll pay off, bro. Just hold. No.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. People can follow me on Twitter at Pierre_Rochard. You can find a lot of what I wrote on the Nakamoto Institute. Just Google Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, and follow the president of the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, Michael Goldstein, at Bitstein. He's awesome. And yeah, go check out the node launcher. Try it out.
Awesome. We'll have links to all that stuff in the description. Have a good day, everyone. That is the end of this broadcast. Goodbye.
Bye, Ezra.